So, as discussed in the conditions of speciation, quick vid, in order for speciation to occur, we must have reproductive isolation of at least two different populations of the same species. Right? And so looking at reproductive isolation, there are two categories of reproductive isolation, right? And so we have sympatric and we have asympatric. Is that right? Is that right? Or is it allopatric? Is it allopatric or asympatric? Hold on, I'll be right back. So exactly as I was just saying, we have sympatric and allopatric, obviously, right? And so allopatric is when the populations are in different places. This is the easiest form of reproductive isolation to imagine in my brain hole, at least. Right? I have a population that is on the east coast of Gloucester, and I have a population that is over in Birmingham, England, right? And there's a giant ocean in between them. And so they can never see each other, can't get across the ocean. So they can never mate, ever, right? There's a geographic barrier between them. A giant geographic feature keeps them from seeing one another. And this can be oceans or lakes or ponds or rivers or mountains or valleys or caves or deserts or Arctic spaces, right? Depending on the species, the insurmountability of the barrier changes, right? But if that barrier is keeping them in separate places, okay, we're talking about geographic isolation, and we're talking about allopatric speciation. Okay? Fairly straightforward. Okay? As long as you know the term allopatric is not asympatric. Right? And then we have, I just need to grab this. I just need to grab the screen. There we go. A more interesting and more varied form of reproductive isolation, we have sympatric. Okay. And so sympatric reproductive isolation occurs when the two populations are in the same area. They can see each other, they can interact with each other, they can have lunch with one another, sometimes they go on Sunday picnics, okay? But something is keeping them from mating, even though they're in the same area. And there are three major types of sympatric reproductive isolation. And the first is behavioral. Right? And so this is when some kind of behavior that is different between the two populations prevents them from mating. An easy example of this to think of is mating calls. And so if population goes cock-a-doodle-doo, and population B goes cock-a-doodle-dee as mating calls, right? They're never going to find each other attractive. And so they can sit there together all day yelling at each other, cock-a-doodle-doo, cock-a-doodle-dee, and they're never going to mate. Because they're like, yo, that ain't sexy, right? So no mating because of some behavioral differences. Yeah. The next is temporal. And temporal is when there are time-based differences. Right? And so something about time keeps these two populations apart. Okay? And so perhaps population A mates on May 18th every year. Right? They call it May mating day, the May mating session. Right? And population B mates on June 2nd. Okay? They call it Juicy June. So we have mating May and Juicy June. And because they mate on different days, even though they hang out all the time, they never make babies together, right? Temporal. And the last is mechanical. And this is when anatomical differences between the two populations physically prevent them from mating. Right? And so an easy way to think of this would be if you have a really big dog, like a really big dog falls in love with a tiny little doggy, right? They may love each other to the ends of the earth, forever and always, right? But when they go to mate, the shapes just don't line up. They just can't make it happen because physically, it's like trying to put Legos and Kinects together, right? The bits and pieces, they don't align. You can't work them out. Can't make a baby. Okay? And so that's mechanical reproductive isolation. That's it. Bye.